Hello, in this video we will discuss John Donne as a metaphysical poet. John Donne is the leader and founder of the metaphysical school of poetry. His poetry is a revolt against the popular current. First of all, Dryden used the term metaphysical for Donne's poetry. He said, "Donne affects the metaphysics." Later on, Dr. Johnson called Donne and his followers the metaphysical poets. Since then the word metaphysical has been used for Donne and his followers. Now move to another slide. What is metaphysical poetry? The term metaphysics means something supernatural and transcendental. Its sense is what is beyond physical. It is concerned with fundamental problems of life and death and soul even after death. The term metaphysical poetry means poetry dealing with metaphysical subjects. These subjects are nature of universe, movements of stars and planets, and the whole relationship of man to God. There are some main characteristics of metaphysical poetry. We should cast a glance at the main characteristics of metaphysical poetry before we proceed to examine Donne as a metaphysical poet. Novel thought and expressions, conceit, wit, obscurity, and learning are the main characteristics of metaphysical poetry. All these important characteristics are found in Donne's poetry. Learning. The metaphysical poets were men of learning. Their poetry reveals their scholarship. From this point of view, Donne is a great metaphysical poet. To show his learning is his chief object. In his poetry he has twisted his vast learning. Due to this his poetry becomes very difficult to understand. In Donne's poetry, there is always an antithesis between natural and divine knowledge. Donne's preoccupation with mortality and death fills his poetry with a macabre element. In his fine sonnet, "Death be not proud," he hates death and says, "One short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more, death thou shalt die." New thoughts and expressions. Donne's poetry is purely intellectual and it makes an appeal to the intellectuals. His thoughts are often new. He has expressed his thoughts in a unique manner. In short, he played with thoughts. In the canonization, "The Flea" and "Death be not proud," one can easily find Donne's new thoughts and expressions. Obscurity. Obscurity is one of the important features of Donne's poetry. In his poetry we find obscurity and vagueness of subject. This is linked with sensibility of literary wit and philosophical conceptions. He frequently combines dissimilar ideas. Thus his poetry is harsh, obscure, and puzzling. Saintsbury is right when he calls him a very great and very puzzling poet. Wit. Wit is one of the chief characteristics of metaphysical poetry. This important feature can be found everywhere in Donne's poetry. It fashions his feeling and thought. Passion, sentiment, and sensuality are subordinated to wit. His wit is unique in the discovery of comparison and analogies. It is realistic and straightforward. It looks to run side by side with humor and irony. The heterogeneous material is compelled into unity by the rapid association of thoughts. "The Flea" is a beautiful example of it. Conceit. Conceit is an important feature of metaphysical poetry. Donne makes an abundant use of conceits. It is an instrument to reveal wit. The conceit is a comparison between two unlike objects or things. In short, it is a far-fetched comparison. Donne's conceits are far-fetched and his imagery is obscure. We can easily point out some of the conceits in Donne's poetry. In conclusion, we can say that as a poet of love, too, Donne is a metaphysical poet. For him love is not physical but spiritual. Thus it can be said that Donne plunged deep in metaphysical pursuits. His selection of subject matter, his treatment, his diction and style prove him to be a true and great metaphysical poet.